Which
I
one?
loved it. Pacific Rim.
Oh, I couldn't stand it. I fell asleep.
Yeah, I loved it. And you're right, and I'm right. It's not like there's an objective. There's no science for determining whether a movie is good or not, because we all
Well,
have different.
there's an objective standard on a monetary amount, but yeah, no, I totally know what you mean.
That's an objective standard of how successful it was at getting people to pay to see it. That doesn't mean it was good or bad. Yeah.
What was the Rise of the Planet of the Apes, San Francisco?
Oh, yeah.
Do I have that one right? I walked out of that movie.
Oh, no kidding. See,
because there was just too much animal stuff. I couldn't deal with it. But I didn't think it was bad. I was just this is not my movie. I don't want to watch this. Nope.
Well,
don't even want to watch
movies you really want to see and you have high expectations, but you're just kind of like, man, really?
Yeah. That's always the thing of like, you almost want to manage your own expectations, because if your expectations are higher, it's harder to enjoy it because it's harder for the movie to meet it.
Yeah.
I agree. Yeah. But generally speaking, I used to be very anti-spoiler. I used to be like, no, let's all respect each other. But the line got pushed so far to where you can't say anything anywhere. That I'm like, okay, that's not livable. We got to have better.
Well, and the whole appointment viewing thing is like, you just never know when anyone's watching anything now. So, like, I mean, you like, if you weren't going to spoil anything, you could just never talk about a movie or a show.
Yeah. Book spoilers are the precedent, right? We know to say like, oh, have you read this before you start talking about it. However, on Twitter, I mean, people talk about movies, facts. I was, alluding to things in Game of Thrones, and maybe I wouldn't have done that in a book. I don't know.
I really want to see Godzilla.
Oh yeah, I'm looking forward to that.
But I'm pretty sure it's going to be just a mediocre movie.
Yeah, that's probably right. But Eileen and I are both excited about that. We saw Rocket Man this weekend.
And you liked
did you like it?
Yeah, it was great.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing that.
Did you play nothing but Elton John songs after you were done seeing it, or were you like, I'm done?
No, we played funny that you asked that. We put on the Elton John playlist on the drive in to kind of get us in the mood. Like, all right, cool. And then on the drive out, the Bluetooth wouldn't connect, so we didn't listen to anything on the way back.
I actually, I was driving down Melrose and past Paramount, the studio, the lot, and was like, oh yeah, Rocket Man. Tom said he liked it. I should watch that. Yeah,
Taron Egerton sings all the songs himself. Well, except for the ones he doesn't sing, but when it's the Elton John character singing, he sings.
Yeah,
and he does a great job. It's a Broadway musical. Don't go in expecting a biopic. This is not like a factual telling of Elton John's life. This is going to give you the sort of what did it feel like to be Elton John as told through song.
Is it weird that Elton John is still with us?
No,
it's not weird. Okay,
no, because it stops in the 80s. It's basically his journey till I'm still standing.
After all this time. Mm-hmm.
All right. You guys ready to stand up some tech news?
Ready as I'll ever be.
Here we go. In 3, 2. Lynn Citron has supported independent tech news directly for 5 years. Be like Lynn. Become a DTNS member at patreon.com/DTNS. This is the Daily Tech News for Monday, May 20th, 2019 in Los Angeles. I'm Tom Merritt.
And from Studio Feline, I'm Sarah Lane.
And from underneath Sunny Skies, I'm the show's producer, Roger Chang.
And we have got some Huawei news for you. All that stuff we talked about last Thursday, the presidential orders, is having some fallout this weekend. It's intricate. It's complex. Nobody really knows what the effect is going to be. We're going to explain that all to you a little later in the show. Let's start with a few tech things you should know.
Kaspersky Labs announced its plans to open a new office in Kigali, Rwanda, to support its East African business. The lab will serve businesses in Rwanda and the wider region.
Microsoft's Edge browser for macOS has been available for a while, if you knew where to find the link. But Microsoft now officially supporting the daily canary builds of Edge for Mac, for macOS 10.12 and above. And Microsoft said weekly dev channel builds will be supported very soon.
A database of contact information for millions of Instagram influencers and brand accounts was found unprotected on Amazon Web Services by researcher Anna Rigsen, who alerted TechCrunch. The data combined public data with phone number and email addresses and estimated worth, so quite a bit of data. TechCrunch believes that the database originated with Mumbai-based social media marketing firm Chatterbox, chatter without any bells. After TechCrunch contacted Chatterbox, it pulled the database offline.
Realme, a sister company to Vivo, Oppo, and OnePlus, it's owned by the same parent company, is launching the Realme 3 Pro phone in Europe. Runs Android 9.0 on a Snapdragon 710 chipset. That improves the AI performance. And it's marketing the phone at gamers by touting some software that improves frame rate and touch responsiveness. Realme promises 21.6% improved aiming speed in PUBG Mobile. The Realme 3 Pro model starts at £175 in the UK and €199 in the Eurozone, available June 5th. All right, before we get to Huawei, let's talk a little about Google Glass. You've heard me get on my soapbox before. It's not dead, and in fact, there's a new version of it, Google Glass Enterprise Edition 2, out Monday for $999. I mean, it doesn't do the same things as the HoloLens, but compared to the HoloLens $3,500, it does feel like a bargain. The glasses look more like glasses now, too. The frame comes from Smith Optics, still uses that tiny little projector to beam images to your eye, so it's not full augmented reality. Google Glass 2 model runs on the Snapdragon XR1 for longer battery life and supports mobile device management. So if you're using it in the enterprise, this will make it easier to roll it out to employees because it can come pre-configured the way you would pre-configure phones and laptops.
Well, and I think, Google Glass Enterprise Edition 2 makes it very clear what it's for.
Yeah,
for the rest, $1,000 for the Google Glass, like it was a failure, wasn't it? It's like, nah, that's not, that Google has moved away from that entire
this is
strategy.
This is for the people who've already been using Google Glass: logistics, manufacturing, field service industries. Firms like H.B. Fuller, Sutter Health, Deutsche Post DHL Group, and AGCO have all been clients of this. So this is definitely something that has been doing well for Google. But like enterprise stuff, it often doesn't get the attention because you don't see commercials for it on the Warriors game.
And that's sort of my next question is like, okay, well, they look a little bit more like glasses. Well, that's fine. I mean, if they're more comfortable, I understand that. But if it's for enterprise and it works well in the enterprise sector, it doesn't matter quite as much, the style portion of it.
It is a secondary consideration. And I'm curious if there's folks in the audience, and I know there are, who use this. Is that something where you're like, yeah, no, we were all like, gosh, I wish they looked a little nicer when I'm walking around, with clients and stuff, right? Was that a consideration, or were you like, no, we didn't really need this, but I guess it's okay? Let us know. feedback@dailytechnewsshow.com.
U.S. FCC Chair Ajit Pai says he will recommend approving the $26.5 billion Sprint T-Mobile merger. The statement came after the two companies agreed to spin off Sprint's Boost mobile prepaid service, as well as a 3-year-old build-out plan for 5G service, with a commitment to not raise prices during its construction. Pai said he will prepare an order on the merger in the coming weeks, which will need approval by 3 of the 5 FCC commissioners. The U.S. Department of Justice's Antitrust Division and several state attorneys general are still examining the deal, but the merger isn't for sure going forward. Bloomberg says a person familiar with the review says that the U.S. Department of Justice is leaning against approval because the remedies don't go far enough. Yeah, so, I mean, Ajit Pai will probably get his fellow Republicans on the FCC commission to vote for his plan, but that's not the last word on it. If the DOJ says they don't like it, then it isn't going to happen. And the DOJ previously disapproved of a T-Mobile and Sprint merger. That was under the Obama administration. But it may still be unsatisfied and say, we still just don't like the removal of competition, which, unlike the FCC, the competitive landscape and whether it would raise prices for consumers are the two main things the DOJ is looking at. Sprint and T-Mobile are saying they won't raise prices, but maybe it's not convincing enough for the DOJ, or maybe just the fact that it would go from 4 major carriers in the country to 3 is enough for the DOJ to say, yeah, no, we still don't think this should happen. Yeah, I asked you guys before the show, are people outraged about this? Because you tend to get outraged whenever there's a merger of 2 very large companies. And yeah, you kind of go like, well, Sprint, T-Mobile, I mean, they're not the biggest players in the market, but the 2 of them together create a very large player. So, I mean, if they say that they're not going to raise prices, I mean, they can't just raise prices, right? I mean, they would get in trouble for it. So, it's where does the outrage really stem from?
The deal with the FCC says they won't raise prices for 3 years. Maybe that's not long enough for the DOJ.
Yeah.
Or maybe it's the fact that the DOJ says, look, we disapproved of an AT&T T-Mobile merger, and look what happened. T-Mobile went from being fourth to a very strong third that is ready to merge with Sprint and become a bigger and better T-Mobile. We think maybe the DOJ thinks if we leave Sprint in fourth place, the same thing will happen. If they're not looking at a merger as saving them, they'll become a better Sprint, and more competition is better. Google issued some data compiled with the help of New York University and the University of California at San Diego, showing that any second factor, including on-device prompts and even text messages, can prevent the most common kind of mass scale attacks. Text message second factors they're known to be something you can intercept, but in these tests, text message second factors prevented 100% of automated bot attacks and 96% of automated phishing attacks. An authenticator app was more secure, and only a physical key like a Yubico prevented both automated bot and phishing attacks, as well as highly targeted attacks. Those are ones where you're an important government official or know some trade secrets at a company, and somebody might be gunning for you. A security key is essential there. But if you're not that, the majority of us probably get by just fine with an on-device prompt or an authenticator code. And if we don't do that, if we just do SMS, it's still way better than not doing it. I know sometimes the security minded go, well, SMS, that's pretty, it's interceptable. It's not perfect, but it's still better than not doing it. So if that's all your service provides you, or if you're trying to encourage someone to sign up for second factor and they're like, I don't want to do an authenticator, I just want to do SMS, then say, yeah, sure. Okay, fine. That is going to prevent a lot more attacks than it would if it weren't there.
Yeah, I think there are two reasons that somebody, would not turn this on. First, they don't totally understand how it works. Second, it seems to be inconvenient. The text message version of two-factor auth, I use it often. And yes, I know it's not the most secure way that I can go about things, but it does give me peace of mind. And it is pretty simple. It works just as advertised. So if there was ever a reason that you needed to go ahead and turn on that two-factor auth, now's the time. Google says so.
I mean, again, it's basically, this is saying if you turn on second factor, at this point anyway, this situation may not last forever. At this point anyway, though, you are almost infinitely improving your security over these kinds of attacks.
Right.
It's incredible just how much of an improvement. Having no other challenge system is pretty bad. Just using your last sign-in location, which some companies do, that prevents automated bots 100% of the time. It does almost nothing against bulk phishing attacks. Using your phone number as a call, again, pretty good against automated bots. Not so great against bulk phishing attacks. Secondary email address, 73% of automated bots, because sometimes they can get on your email, and 68% of bulk phishing attacks. But man, it goes up to 100% for security key, 96% of bulk phishing attacks for SMS, and 99% for on-device prompts. So there is no rational reason not to turn on a second factor if it's available.
Well, you're going to like this next story, I'm sure of it. Stanford University students from the school's Extreme Mobility Lab are celebrating a four-legged robot named Doggo, a quadrupedal robot that's unique in its low cost and also its accessibility. Doggo's total cost is less than $3,000, and its design is completely open source. So you or I or anybody can print off the plans and assemble a Doggo if we so desire.
Now, granted, this is still hobbyist stuff, right? This is great for folks in the lab who are like, we can't really get the budget to do what Boston Dynamics does, but we can get together $3,000. Yeah, that's in the school budget. That could even be in some high school budgets. So this is going to expand accessibility to these kinds of designs quite a bit. And it's the kind of thing that more amateur hobbyists might get into and start messing around with, which is the kind of thing you want to see right before a product category takes off. We saw it with quadcopters. We've seen it with desktop PCs, back going from the Heathkit days into the, Apple II days. So I think this is worth keeping an eye on. Doggo may or may not be the thing that causes the robot revolution, but it certainly is the kind of thing, because you just need to buy the parts and the design is open source and it's incredibly functional. It does a lot of the things that you used to only see a company like Boston Dynamics be able to do.
Yeah, it's interesting to me that we're still in that period where it's like, is the robot like a human? Maybe not. Is the robot like a dog? People love dogs. Let's call it Doggo. That makes sense. This is a four-legged robot that is inexpensive and has a lot of potential. I mean, that's what it is. Whether or not you want it to resemble a dog is sort of beside the point, but it's still something that we're like, oh, how do I relate that to a thing that actually exists? And then, be impressed with the technology.
Yeah, The Verge points out that this thing is comparable to robots that cost tens of thousands of dollars. For instance, it has more torque than Ghost Robotics' similarly sized Minotaur, which costs around $11,500. Greater vertical jumping ability than MIT's Cheetah 3 robot. It just does more because it's got a better design for the leg mechanism and the use of more efficient motors. They did some great software things where it doesn't have springs, but the software is able to treat I guess they're quadrangles of the legs like springs to be able to absorb shocks and move around. So yeah, it's called Doggo because that's cute and makes people go, oh, little robot dog. But it does way more than just be a dog. And it's
Right.
sort of the limits of it are your imagination.
In fact, what it does is not really dog-like at all. It's like, wow, this is a really cool robot.
Yeah, it could do flips. I mean, some dogs could do flips, I suppose.
Yeah, well, not my dog.
You could download the flip program for this, which you cannot do for any of our dogs. At least I'm pretty sure that you can't for Ray. Sawyer, maybe. I don't know. Back on April 16th, we mentioned a Hackaday article about how the 5G rollout could impact weather forecasting. If you remember back last month, the short version was that 23.8 gigahertz spectrum is very useful for measuring water vapor, but could get drowned out by nearby 5G signals. Now, it's not like 5G is broadcasting right in that spectrum, but there could be some bleed. 5G licensees are required to limit that bleed, limit out-of-band emissions, but the frequencies are so close. Back when we reported on it last month, it was uncertain how much error there might be. Well, now the U.S. National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration head, Neil Jacobs, testified to the House Subcommittee on the Environment that he estimates the use of 24 gigahertz frequency for 5G could reduce weather forecast accuracy by up to 30%, roughly as accurate as forecasting was back in the 1980s. So this is consistent with that Hackaday article. NOAA estimates 77% data loss from its satellites' passive microwave sounders, reducing the ability to predict hurricanes by as much as 2 days. Again, we mentioned that same thing when we talked about the Hackaday article. So this is different because it's the chief of NOAA telling the U.S. Congress, like, yeah, we think this is a problem. And we need to do something about it. Senators Ron Wyden and Maria Cantwell have written a letter to the FCC chair Ajit Pai requesting the companies stop using the 24 gigahertz frequency until they can be sure that it won't interfere with weather forecasts.
Yeah, my initial reaction was like, well, who even knows when it's going to rain anyway? But when you talk about something like a hurricane, something that's going to affect people and potentially hurt people, this is pretty serious.
Yeah, and we talked about back in April, like people like to say like, weather predictions, they're never right, but they are right more often than they used to be. In fact, within 24 hours, they're pretty dead on. And you may not have noticed that as it slowly got better over the years, but if suddenly it flipped back to the 1980s about whether to predict rain or not, you would notice. And I think you would be upset.
So what's the solution here?
Yeah,
like what is there another, piece of the spectrum we can just kind of convert all this 5G stuff to?
Yeah, I mean, there are plenty of other spectrums. I guess one more drastic solution would be to say you just can't use the 24 gigahertz spectrum. I know you thought so. We'll refund your money for the broadcast. That would be the safest way to preserve it. But there might be ways to move the spectrum a little farther over, do some technology to prevent bleed. Hopefully the carriers will get on board and say, yes, let's take this seriously. Let's come up with a solution that allows us to still use this frequency without threatening the bleed over into 23.8, without having that out of band stuff. The thing is, that's costly, and the carriers aren't going to want to do that. I get it.
Well, and as 5G becomes a reality for folks, and if speeds are great, if you have to, to kind of weigh your options, how many folks would be like, okay, we'll just go back to weather from the 1980s because, I like this 5G service otherwise.
Yeah, I mean, and the fact is you can still provision 5G service without using that spectrum. It's just going to be costlier because there's less spectrum to put your other services on. So.
Right.
Hey, folks, if you want to get all the tech headlines each day in about 5 minutes, subscribe to dailytechheadlines.com. All right, we told you we'd get into it. Let's recap for those who missed last Thursday. Last week, the U.S. Department of Commerce added Huawei to an entity list that prevents it from acquiring U.S. technology without approval. This is the same thing that happened to ZTE last year. Somewhat confusing this issue is that the president also issued a directive to have the Department of Commerce name companies that threaten security and prevent our domestic manufacturers in the United States from buying things from those companies. These are two different things. That order hasn't gone into effect yet because they haven't named anybody, and that would prevent, say, T-Mobile from buying routers from Huawei, potentially. But what happened over the weekend was the entity list, and this is the more disastrous one for Huawei because this says no U.S. company can sell their technology to Huawei without approval. And, well, that approval has not been forthcoming, and the consequences have started to roll out. Now, the U.S. Commerce Department has said it might grant Huawei a temporary license to prevent interruption of service for existing networks as regarding to the gear, because there are some rural ISPs particularly, and a few other smaller ISPs that need Huawei tech for maintenance. Like if they have a breakdown with what existing Huawei gear and they can't buy new gear, they can't fix it. That temporary license would only allow for maintenance. It would not allow Huawei to build new products to sell to the U.S. Huawei CEO Ron Zhengfei said Saturday to Nikkei, it is expected that Huawei's growth may slow, but only slightly. Also, we will not change our management at the request of the U.S. or accept monitoring as ZTE has done. So on Saturday, Huawei was saying, yeah, we might lose a little growth, whatever, no skin off our nose, we'll be fine. We're not going to agree to what ZTE had to get through this. So they drew their line in the sand. Huawei also said it was prepared because they can use their own high silicon chip. They can supply chips for a lot of their own products from their own chip maker. Now, Bloomberg says Huawei also stockpiled 3 months worth of chips from U.S. companies because it's quite a different matter to change your entire supply chain and manufacturing process for chips that you make and hope those chips work as well as the ones you're replacing than it is to say, you know what, we got 3 months worth of Intel Qualcomm chips sitting on the shelf. We'll be able to last this for 3 months. So I think that's worth paying more attention to, although they can conceivably make their own chips. The big news came on Sunday when Google said, we've got to comply with the U.S. order, and so we're cutting off Huawei from Android products. Here's what Huawei, this is confusing, so I'll try to walk you through it. Huawei will lose early access to Android security updates, but they won't lose all access. They'll just have to wait until those security updates are published to the open source page for Android. Right now, Huawei is among the many companies who, as a licensor of Android outside of China, get early access to security updates so they can be ready on day one to produce them. This would delay security updates for Huawei users. Now, Huawei says it will continue to provide security updates and after-sales service. That's probably what they mean as well. We'll just have to wait till they come to the open source page. Huawei also will lose access to the Google Play Store, to Google Play Services, and to the Google apps like YouTube and Search and Maps. Not a big deal in China where they're not allowed anyway, but any Huawei phone they sell in India or Europe or anywhere else in the US or in the world has those apps right now. If you own a Huawei phone right now, it's already certified to run all that stuff. So you're not going to lose access. Google isn't kicking the existing phones off. Once you're certified, you're certified. So you can run the store and your apps will continue to function. You'll be fine. You might not get those security updates though. It does not have access to these Google products in China, so Huawei has experience creating a phone without them. However, the total cutoff will affect security update timeliness in China too. Again, it's not that they won't get security updates. They'll come later than everybody else. Huawei also loses the ability to market under the Android name, which doesn't hurt it in China, but will hurt it elsewhere. And Huawei says it has an in-house operating system under development for mobile as well as desktop. So potentially they could just change operating systems, but that could be a harder sell for people who are familiar with Android. Also, major apps would need to be made for a new operating system. In fact, some major apps rely on Google Play services to run. So even if you can sideload them without using the Google Play Store, they might not run if they don't have Google Play services. And to top it all off, the chip makers also said, yes, we are going to have to comply with this and not sell Intel chips, which Huawei needs for its laptops and its servers. Qualcomm chips, which it uses for modems and a few other mobile processors. Broadcom, Micron, Western Digital, and Xilinx have all stopped supplying chips to Huawei. Now, Infineon was reported to have stopped, but said, no, the great majority of our products are delivered to Huawei, not subject to U.S. export control laws restrictions. Therefore, those shipments will continue. So it sounds like maybe a few Infineon products are affected, but not all of them. And Lumentum Holdings, which is the major supplier of Apple's Face ID technology, said it has discontinued shipments to Huawei, and Huawei represents about 18% of its total revenue. So, Sarah, Roger, now that we got all this nailed down, Huawei says, hey, we got 3 months of supplies. At least that's what the sources are saying. We also can build our own chips. We can make our own operating system. We're fine. We won't be affected.
Well, the whole sort of growth may slow, but only slightly, might not ring true over the last couple of days on Huawei's part. But yeah, I want to know more about the operating system, which reportedly has been in the works for several years, although no one's seen it. And for the company to be like, okay, we don't even need Android. That is a real tall order. I mean, it's either Android or iOS for many folks.
It really just sounds like they're putting on a brave face in front of, at this time, a very intractable situation. They're looking at other options. It kind of sucks because they're kind of between a rock and a hard place. And what they decide to do, they could take the position, well, we wait this for 2 years. Maybe there might be a different administration in the U.S. and, we can maybe ride out this storm, so to speak. But on the other hand, it's going to be painful. It's not a pain-free situation.
Yeah, and there's a lot of confusion about it. In fact, in our chat room, a few people are saying, well, wait a minute, if a Huawei phone's already certified to run Android, can't the carrier market it? Can't Vodafone or Telefonica market it as Android? Yes and no. Any phone that's already been built and sitting on a shelf, I guess could. But any new phone that Huawei ships can't. And we're not talking about models here. We're talking about individual phones. This is an export control. So it's about the actual device. You can't slap Android on the box and say it's Android if you don't have approval from Google to do that. So, yeah, I think Huawei's trying to say we can play a hardball game more than ZTE. But Roger, I'm with you. I feel like what they're hoping is that the governments involved get this figured out within 3 months, that they built up a plan to last 3 months so that they didn't have to do what ZTE did. And they hope that whatever politics are causing this will blow over before those 3 months are out. Because, man, once those 3 months are out, it is a hard sell to have a new operating system. Even in places in the world like India and Africa, people recognize Android and they want that reassurance. Not as big of a deal in China, perhaps, but it could be a blow if people are like, yeah, but I like it. I know it can't be called Android, but I like it's Android. Now you got this new operating system, and is it as good? Is it as bug proof? Is it as tested? It's
well, and if you're Google as well, it's like, this is not fun for Google.
No.
For anybody who's like, well, why doesn't Google just refuse?
Google and chip makers all have to do this.
Yeah.
Comply with US law and lose revenue because of it.
Well, a story that will be unfolding over the next 3 months, if not more. Thanks to everybody who participates in our subreddit. You should be with us for the next 3 months and many more. Submit stories and vote on them at dailytechnewsshow.reddit.com. We're also on Facebook, facebook.com/groups/dailytechnewsshow. And we haven't checked in with Nate Langston in a while, so let's do that now. He's revealing what's coming up on the next text message, including a special guest and Netflix popularity charts.
Thanks, guys. And hey, DTNS listeners, you can get double Tom this week if you listen to episode 169 of Text Message, because he's on the show talking with me about how US and UK facial recognition efforts are pretty different in some ways. Plus, without Tom, sad face, why exactly did Netflix choose the UK as the first country in the world to have a popularity chart feature? We have a few theories. Only some are conspiratorial. All that is available by going to techpodcast.uk and checking out episode 169 of Text Message. Cheerio.
Lovely. That was so much fun to chat with Nate. My only regret is that Ian wasn't on the call too, because Ian is Nate's co-host and is fantastic as well.
Let's check out the mailbag, shall we? We had a great conversation last Friday about the idea of Adobe doing some interactive tutorials and where people get their tutorials now and how that can be a little convoluted. Mikey D wrote in and said, I prefer to educate myself on Adobe software with Classroom in a Book series by Peach Pit Publishing. Occasionally, they have a huge sale and I stock up on all the software that I own and want to become proficient in. A lot of the books have lesson files to work along with the author and instructor. And if the course is web-based, it'll have videos that show each step of the way to follow along with. Instead of having a bunch of books on a bookshelf, I prefer to download them digitally in EPUB, Mobi, or PDF format. Another great source, lynda.com, now owned by LinkedIn, which also has lesson files to follow along on a tiered subscription. Or now, a lot of libraries offer lynda.com for free with a library card basic plan. I became proficient in Microsoft products such as Excel and Access with their courses, and I've amazed my coworkers.
Amazing your coworkers is always a good thing. Thank you, Mikey D. Good tips there on that sort of thing. I am glad our conversation on Friday sparked that.
Absolutely.
And then all our conversations about Redfin have sparked another idea, Sarah. Jeff says there's been a lot of discussion about Redfin Direct for buying a house online over the past couple of weeks. Clearly, the next Live With It segment needs to be Sarah buying a house using Redfin Direct and then living with or in it. Next Patreon tier.
Let's buy a house. I'll tell you how it goes. It'll be great.
Yes, we will buy a house.
But I don't want to move out after 3 months.
Bond County, Illinois.
We might figure out what Huawei's up to after 3 months, but I'm going to still be in that house, right?
Yeah. I don't know where we could afford a house on our Patreon budget.
I don't know either. But I like where your mind's going, Jeff. Yeah,
exactly.
Think big.
No promises, but we'll see what we can do. Thanks to everybody who supports us on Patreon, whether it gets us to buying Sarah a house or not. It is incredibly important. And right now, we're 11 days away from the end of the month, and we're up 5 patrons over last month. So keep it going. Let's see how many more we can get. Don't let it fall, folks. Become a patron right now, and you get all kinds of cool inside perks like RSS feeds, editor's desk monologues from me, Live With It episodes with Sarah, sometimes not houses, but definitely tech that you appreciate, and all kinds of other perks at patreon.com/DTNS.
Tell you what, I'm enjoying my smart light bulbs, taking lots of notes. Can't wait to tell you all about it pretty soon. Our email address is feedback@dailytechnewsshow.com. If you'd like to write us, please do, early and often. We're also live Monday through Friday at 4:30 p.m. Eastern, 2030 UTC. Find out more at dailytechnewsshow.com/live.
Back tomorrow with more tech news. Talk to you then.
This show is part of the Frog Pants Network. Get more at frogpants.com.
Diamond Club hopes you have enjoyed this program.
All righty then.
Whoop, whoop. Good Huawei discussion, Tom.
Thank you.
I mean, you carried that whole thing.
Well, there's a lot to get through to kind of set the table.
It was really good.
It was actually very.
Yeah, it was super informative. I think if somebody was hearing it for the first time,
it was
great job.
You did a great explainer. I mean, just kind of like getting everyone to the
stop.
page.
I'm not going to give you a raise.
Oh, in that case,
Tom, you look nice today.
Tom, you should get a haircut.
I know you want me to buy you a house.
You know what I like? A house. A house of my very own.
No, thank you guys. I'm glad that came
That was
across.
good. It was super, super good.
There's the 5G no way.
Mm-hmm.
Get it?
Who's
I
cute
do.
no? The glasses look like glasses.
Snozberries taste like snozberries.
Google Glass. I'm not dead yet. Huawei says there is no us. Get it? Like you.
US.
Yeah.
Well, Huawei would like there to be an us.
Yeah.
It's not. Huawei didn't walk away from this whole thing.
Huawei says they don't need us.
Mm.
That's
Well,
closer to it.
that is kind of what they're saying. A little bluff
Mhm.
action going on.
Mhm.
It is.
Yeah.
It's pretty transparent, but no, it's,
Right. Like,
I mean,
we
also
might be
kind
impacted
of-
slightly.
whether it's true or not, kind of what they have to say. I
Well,
think.
yeah, that's
Yeah.
you have to put on a brave face because
It might be also true, but yeah, it's what I would expect them to say no matter what. All right, let's do
Right.
that.
Yeah.
Huawei says they don't need us. And then we had some GDIs. Spoiler: it's a good day.
I like the righteous indignation or sanctimonious.
Choose one. Yeah, that's good. Okay, we could do that. I like that.
That's good. I love the word indignation.
Yeah,
It's just a great word.
It sounds very literary.
It does. Yeah. And I like how dramatic it is. I'm indignant.
I had the nicest encounter with an evangelist today on my dog walk.
What does that mean?
So, there's people from multiple denominations that will go around and evangelize to you. Have you
Like
know,
a religious.
yeah, heard the good
Yes.
word kind of
Yeah.
thing, right?
Okay. Mhm.
Often they come to your door, maybe they leave a pamphlet, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I was out walking my dog, and these two ladies, I could kind of tell what they were up to. There's a vibe and
Yeah.
such.
Sometimes
They come in groups.
They came up and they were like, "Oh, what a beautiful dog." And I'm like, well, okay, there's nothing wrong with that. I was like, "Oh, thanks." Yeah. And we talked about dogs for 5 minutes.
Yeah.
One of them came up, was like, "Oh, I have a dog too. You're so sweet." It was dog. We just talk about dogs, how loyal, how great dogs are. Aren't dogs great? And then at the very end, they're like, "Well, you probably know we're this denomination, and if you're interested in some answers to maybe some questions you have here, our website is da 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 da."
Oh, they didn't
And-
actually have like a physical pamphlet
No,
or anything.
And that
Oh.
was it. They're like, "Have a great day, enjoy your walk." I was like, "Now that's the way to do it." I'm not saying they won me over to their particular denomination, but I came away feeling positive about it versus kind of annoyed, like, "Oh, I had to go through that,"
Right.
It depends on which community you're
Yeah,
in.
although I think that they're offering you the chance to forget the URL. You
mean,
kind of want to make somebody like do it right there.
Very carefully not saying which denomination.
Of course,
in
yes.
order to,
And yeah.
stay out, but also totally forgot the URL.
Right. They need like a QR code or something. Like, you got a phone on you, right? Take your phone out. Let's make this easy. There are some, well, I mean, I don't want to say ladies, but it always seems to be women that they've kind of got a little, it's like they have a little stall set up around one of my dog walks. And it's very old school, where it's almost like, like almost looks like a lemonade stand, but it's about spreading the gospel of their particular their word. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of outside of where their church is, which is not far away. So it all kind of makes sense. But yeah, it's the sort of thing where, and they're really nice. And I see them all the time because they're just, sometimes they're posted up when I'm walking in the morning, but it's sort of like, if I stop and make pleasantries, like that's what we're going to talk about. It's not like, "Oh, we just encountered you. Cool dog." It's very, they have one job.
Well, all five stars for this kind of evangelism, because it was so low pressure.
Yeah.
I came away with a positive feeling, and I got to talk to nice people about my dog. Like it's like I got no problem with that.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, if somebody wants to talk about how you might benefit from their religion, I mean, it doesn't mean they're one-note people. They can talk about other things.
Well, and sometimes those conversations can, and I'm thinking back, like in the 90s, somebody came to my door. It was like, they start to get accusatory and pushy, and like, you need to take action right this second. And I'm like, that feels like a cult when you're pressuring me to do something right this second. That doesn't feel like.
This reminds me, I hadn't thought about this in a while, but this is many years ago. I was pretty young, like young enough to not totally know what was going on for a while, but somebody had I was at a gas station, and a guy, he kind of had this whole spiel where he had some story and, got me talking, and it was about I don't even want to say which one it is. Doesn't really matter. But it was sort of something that I would consider culty. And, when I finally sort of realized what was going on, I was like, oh, I'm sorry. I'm not interested. But, you seem nice. Thanks. Bye. Well, at the same gas station, months later, the same guy did the same thing to me. And this time I was like, oh my God, you just hang out at this gas station? Like, we've already talked. You don't remember me? And of course he hadn't, because, there were so many other people that, he had done this to. But I was actually really annoyed the second time because I felt like no longer special. The first time I was like, oh yeah, well, it's just not totally for me.
You can be saved.
The second time I was like, you're a fraud. I've heard this.
You're not interested in my soul.
You just rewinded and did the same thing again.
Have a quota.
You don't even remember me.
I used to get propositioned all the time, and I think it's because I was walked to school by myself.
Proposition sounds different than what we're talking about, but I think you mean the same thing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, pamphlets.
Yes.
Discussion about life answers. Usually on the bus or near mass transit.
I don't, well, it's probably because I live in an apartment, so it's like kind of hard to get to my front door, but how people will have like no solicitors, like by their front door, where I'm always like, do you really need that? But I guess if you have that outside your front door, someone would be like, it's probably not worth ringing the doorbell. They've made it very clear that they don't want it.
I'll be honest. I mean, I work from home. I do recordings. Like, I should definitely have a no solicitor. I have a good reason to be like, please don't ring my doorbell.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Like my dogs will go crazy. It's like super disruptive.
But that said, I don't, because it happens so rarely. But again, I guess it depends on where you live.
I get so many solicitors for home improvement. Like, oh, do you need you could use some solar panels, or have you considered
like ringing your doorbell type thing?
Oh, I have a doorbell, but people haven't learned to hold it down for more than half a second, so they knock on the door.
But I mean, they're coming to your front door.
Yes,
I get templates for that kind of stuff, but people don't actually ring the door.
Oh, and I also got the one with the fruit or the produce delivery to your front door of that service.
I used to actually do that when I lived in San Francisco. Well, actually in San Rafael, I used to have that.
And when my father-in-law still lived here, he ordered that, but he ended up only using like a third of it, and the rest of it was like I would try to find a way to use.
That was always my thing. Is I was about half fruit. I'd eat all the fruit.
Yes.
And then I'd have to try to figure out recipes to go with the vegetables. And
it's like kale, turnip,
Romanesco,
turnip.
I got some Romanesco that looked great one time. I'm like, I don't know. I mean, I guess you can prepare it just like broccoli, but I know people are like, oh, it's not hard. You just steam it and put some salt and pepper.
If they shipped it with a side of like cubed beef or something, they could make a stew.
And having fruit and vegetable, like it's such a great idea and concept, but like, for example, last night, I've got a bunch of stuff that's going to go bad if I don't eat it in the next 24 hours, but I just wanted to eat mac and cheese for dinner.
Yeah.
Like I was just like, it's just not happening. You just, so it's like when you've got stuff that's going bad, you start to like, there's this guilt aspect of it.
No, I feel guilty all the time. I always nag my wife. It's like, we need to eat this.
Right. Yeah.
It's like, I want a pizza.
Well, that's called my lunch. Anything that Eileen doesn't want to eat that's going to go bad becomes my lunch.
I have to say that that Instapot, so in heavy use.
Yeah.
Instapot gets high marks from everybody I know that has one. We probably just get an Instapot.
It's like it's the mentality of a crock pot, but with the speed of a microwave.
Yeah, because the crock pot is it intimidates me. I'm like, it's kind of have to go all day. I can't do that.
Because it steams at you, it looks angry.
Right. I mean, that's part of the reason I don't cook rice as much as I cook pasta, because I'm like, it's gonna take like half an hour.
You don't have a rice cooker?
No.
Oh yeah, you got to get a rice cooker.
I think it's only a staple in Asian homes.
Although rice cookers still take a long time for things like brown rice.
See, and then like we were talking about orzo the other day. Orzo takes 5 minutes. So it's like if I have like a hankering for something, like in 5 minutes it's done. Where with rice, I have to be like, all right, I'm going to be in the kitchen for a while.
So, and then I run into the issue that my wife really isn't a big rice eater. So it's like, man, if I make a pot of rice, I have to eat it all.
What about Ellie? She probably likes
No,
rice.
she
She
doesn't
like
like
rice?
anything besides chicken nuggets.
She'll eventually like rice, I would guess.
She used to eat it. She used to eat vegetables. She used to eat fruit, and then she hit 2 and it was 2.5, and it was like, "Poof."
Yeah, it
She was
happens.
like, I want to, exert some of my power.
She
Yeah,
heard-
my sister-in-law's daughter was like that. I was so impressed. Like she would just eat anything, and then she hit 2. Doesn't sound like she got quite as strict as your daughter, but she got stricter.
One of my younger cousins went through a period where, she was a very picky eater. In fact, if I remember correctly, all she would eat is bananas and French fries.
Oh wow!
And and it was like at Thanksgiving dinner, like the rest of us are eating normal dinner, and it's like, unnamed cousin has to eat, and I remember like kind of giving my aunt a hard time about it, and she was like, step off, Sarah. And it it was a phase, it passed.
Yeah.
But because I was like, that's crazy. Like I would be in so much trouble if I did that. No one's gonna buy me French fries.
Well, and I don't know. When I was young, I ate pretty much everything, so I never experienced this. But I remember my sister being told, like, if you don't eat it, then you don't eat anything. Like that's
Right.
That's what my mom said. It's like,
to you.
you have to eat everything.
Yeah.
There
It's like, why? My father doesn't eat everything.
Or
Well,
there,
yeah, I
there were
wasn't
the
even talking
kids
about
who
that,
like you
but
can't
there was-
leave the table until you're
finish your
done.
plate thing, but also like
Yeah.
there wasn't a like, oh, we'll make you a special meal. Like this is what we made to eat. You'll eat it. And if
Yeah.
you take anything and put it on your plate, you finish it.
Right. There were,
Kids
I don't know. Maybe I probably remember my childhood a little rosier than my parents might, but I don't remember being particularly picky. My mom was a really good cook. There were a couple dishes that I wasn't crazy about when they'd come around, but always liked vegetables.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'll encounter an adult who will be like, broccoli, ugh, never. And I'm like, really? It's so good. I mean, broccoli? It's
I pretty much ate everything. I think
staple, yeah.
Sauerkraut was the only thing I didn't really like to eat.
Yeah. I went through a period where I thought I hated
I
lasagna,
like sauerkraut now.
and that's insanity because
Why would
lasagna
you
is wonderful.
I loved broccoli. I never understood why people didn't like broccoli.
I just thought I didn't like it for some reason. Oh,
I think
broccoli
a
is
lot
the
of kids
best.
just thought it looked weird because it was green, but
Oh, I loved it. I used to. I kid you not. When I was in 3rd up until maybe 4th grade, I used to imagine I was a dinosaur, and those were the treetops.
that's
And I would
great.
go like,
I love the story.
Ah.
Yeah.
Well, broccoli also,
I
it's
used to do it
like
with parsley.
you can, put cheese on it, or like do
Oh,
like
yeah.
a vinegar thing, or
My
My
toss it in
grandma would
something
make it
else.
with butter. It was all soft and salty and buttery. Like it was delicious.
Yeah, yeah.
You're just eating it wrong.
Well, but like, okay, so broccoli is just one example, but again, there are adults that are perfectly smart, wonderful people, and they're just weird about vegetables. And I'm like, I just feel like you're missing out on so many dishes. Like how much starch and meat can you eat? The veggies are the fun part. Colorful.
the elder Bush was well known for his dislike of broccoli.
Really?
Yeah, they used
I
to
don't-
make fun of him. Only not they, but like occasionally
Yeah.
it would crop up in like a Jay Leno monologue for.
It was
for
just
the
known
opening.
that he wasn't going to
Yeah.
eat broccoli.
He just
Yeah.
didn't like broccoli.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know why broccoli specifically. You never hear people really talking about how much they hate cauliflower.
I
Although
like
I'm sure
cauliflower.
I'm sure some people do. Love cauliflower.
I like all the vegetables that are gassy, which is why I don't eat too much of it.
I all vegetables. Never met a vegetable I didn't like.
I used to hate bok choy, which is odd since I'm Chinese and it's literally one of the main dishes I would have to eat. But I
bok
didn't
That
like
actually
it.
makes
'Cause-
sense as a kid. Like the thing that's most
Yeah.
common might be the thing you're more likely to hate.
Well, I didn't like it because it was very messy to eat, and
It's so fibrous that can be annoying to like cut through.
well, but see, this is the thing. Like we ate with chopsticks. You're not cutting
Yeah, it's
bok choy
true.
with a
That's true.
chopstick.
Well, but it's still kind of, sometimes it'll kind of get stuck in your teeth. Bok choy to this day, sometimes I'm like, this is a little problematic, but I like the taste of it.
Mhm.
But it does have that stringiness sometimes. What is bok choy good for? Like, because it's such a
beef.
staple, but no. I mean, like
health
for
wise.
nutrition. Yeah.
Oh, like what kind of vitamins? Does
Yeah.
it
Like
have?
what's it? I would assume it's
Bok choy.
the
What
same thing
is
as like a
it good
cruciferous type of.
Yeah. Send us your thoughts on bok choy.
Please do.
Video listeners, feedback at dailytechnewsshow.com. Audio listeners, stick around to see if we discover what bok choy is good for.
Bok choy.